Before I start this video, please subscribe to our channel. Story 1. A few years ago, this happened to a friend. He was on vacation at his grandfather's place in a rural area, basically the middle of nowhere, with the closest neighbor being kilometers away. Like with any countryside building, there was no proper plumbing in the house, so the restroom was just outside. It was about 3 a.m., pitch black outside, when my friend decided to go to the restroom. Using the torch on his phone, he made his way there, did his thing, and right before leaving, he took a photo. He had opened the restroom door ajar to take a snap on Snapchat of all the darkness surrounding him. The idea was to show his friends how brave he was, being alone in the dark. He almost dropped his phone because the latter wasn't true. In the picture, there was a door on the left with the empty void just next to it. But in the darkness, if you looked closely, it seemed like a couple standing and facing the camera. The man looked like he was wearing a suit, and the woman in front appeared to be wearing a red dress. He was really shaken by the image he had just taken. He quickly wrote, "Take a screenshot," and hit send to everyone, including me, while trying to muster up the confidence to return to his house. As for an explanation, we still don't really know what caused it. It may 100% be an illusion, just under the right angle. It may also be Photoshop, but he hasn't told us it was a joke in all these years. I still have it saved on my desktop, and I still get shivers whenever I see it. Story 2. About a month ago, I was sitting at the lunch table with my 6 close friends, like any other day at school. Something was off that day because my friend Amanda looked kind of nervous. It wasn't long before she told me she was going to tell me something later. I told her it was okay and that she could tell me now, so she did. Back in late July, Amanda played with a Ouija board with another friend of ours, and she was scared that I would be disappointed because we are Catholic. I told her it was okay, that she could do what she wanted, and that I wouldn't ever judge her. Anyway, Amanda asked me if I remembered when she played with the Ouija board. I said, "What about it?" And she said she didn't really tell me what the ghost told her. She told me they met a ghost named Nick, who said he had died of obesity. Amanda said he wasn't evil. Basically, what happened was, Nick told Amanda and my other friend that Amanda was going to die before she turned 20. Amanda told me that he also said she was going to die because she would be thrown into a river by a close friend. I started to panic, thinking this was me. I asked her who, and she said it was our other friend called Becca. I looked beside me and saw Becca talking to our other friends and not paying any attention to us. I was scared. I asked if she was lying, and she said she swore she was telling the truth and that she would put her hand on the Bible and say she wasn't lying. I asked if she or any of our other friends were moving the planchette, and she said no, as they had promised not to move it before they played. I always told her not to mess around with ghosts or Ouija boards, and now I feel scared. Before I start a third story, please like this video if you still haven't done it yet. Story 3. My grandmother is almost 60 and in really bad shape. My aunt had just left her to go to college, so my family decided to move her in with us. My mother and I were almost done putting all of my grandma's stuff in storage. It was pretty late, about 2 us in the morning, and the house's power went out. We were on our way back to the house during the very last trip. I looked at my mom and said, "Hey Mom, I know this sounds weird, but I wish I had more paranormal experiences in my life." She laughed and said something unimportant. We finally made it back to the house, and I realized my grandma's cat was in one of the rooms in a pet carrier. I knocked on the door and said the cat's name. I walked away, and all I heard from that room was a cat hiss and then knock, knock, knock. I'm only 15 and don't normally curse in front of my mother, but I ran out of the house screaming, "Holy hiki?" She asked what was wrong, and I said that I knocked on the room with the cat, and it knocked back. Then she told me, "That was knocking? I thought you dropped something." She had heard the knocking too, and she wasn't even inside the house. Sadly, I had to go back in to get the cat. On my way off the front porch, my mom and I both heard something. The best way to explain it is the sound you make when you wake up from a very deep sleep, that groaning kind of sound. We got into the car as fast as we could and drove away. We told my grandmother about what happened, and she said she heard the knocking coming from that door every night. It would wake her up and make her think someone was breaking in. I even remembered her telling us about it a few weeks ago. I haven't been back to that house since. Story 4. I've never been into paranormal stuff because I've had enough activity happen to me over the years. This last summer, my friends and I decided it was a good idea to make our own Ouija board and play it at their house and also at the cemetery. They asked questions about things I knew were true, and they had no way of knowing. I could sense it was a real thing. Then, out of curiosity, my friend Karen asked, "Will our friend Penny be pregnant at age 19? The board responded with a yes. Fast forward a few months, and I get a phone call from Penny saying she's actually pregnant. In that moment, I've never been so awestruck and freaked out at the same time. Nothing like that has ever worked before, and now I'm a little more freaked out knowing the board actually worked. I cannot believe that it came true, and that the board predicted something so insane. I'm kind of excited about the other stuff we asked, but I'm also very leery of it. Story 5. I live with my husband in a large house in the country. We live right next to a large field, and past that is a wheat field. We love to take our pit bulls out for runs out there. There is a street running horizontally from the field, as we live in a very tiny subdivision out in the middle of nowhere. This happened in June or July of 2014. I was sitting on the bed talking to my mom on the phone at around 11 p.m. My husband was in the study down the hall. The 2 windows in the master bedroom face outside into the backyard. Everything was normal until I heard what sounded like a plane landing in our backyard. Only, it didn't sound like a plane engine in the slightest. It was so close to the windows and the ground that the house shook. It was so loud that I couldn't hear my mom clearly anymore. This noise freaked my cat out, so she bolted to hide under my dresser. I told my mom to hold on as I rushed to the back door to see what in the world was making such a loud, explosive engine noise. That's when I heard the explosion. Great. Now, whatever is in the backyard exploded. I threw the door open and saw nothing, not a darn thing. And it was silent. Not a car, not a person, not a plane, nothing. I assumed that an 18-wheeler must have crashed outside. Perhaps they needed help. So I ran around into the front yard and looked up and down the horizontal road by the field, looking for a crash. Nothing. All the noise was gone. I looked up the street next to us as well. No one heard it. I was the lone dingbat outside at 11 p.m. I went back inside and told my mom I'd call her back because now I'm freaked out. I just heard World War III happen, and there's no explanation for where it came from. I then asked my husband if he heard anything, and he told me he felt the house shake a bit, but he was gaming with his headphones on and didn't hear a thing. Apparently, Castiel, our pit bull, didn't hear anything either. She didn't bark or stir. I hope I explained this well enough because I'd really like to know what I heard. The noises had to have come from somewhere, right? I don't understand how our neighbors behind us didn't come barreling out of their house looking around for the noises like I did. Any insight would be appreciated. Before I start the 6th story, please like this video if you still haven't done it yet. Story 6. I was 16 and bored at my girlfriend's cousin's place. Thai people are a bunch of superstitious people. I'm only half, but my girlfriend, her cousin, and her friend are 100% Thai. We decided to make a Ouija board, just writing letters and numbers on a piece of printer paper. We lit candles and politely asked spirits to join us. It was freaky how the coin we pushed around seemed to move so quickly and accurately, spelling out the names of our future boyfriends and girlfriends. It was easy for me to blame Joey, the most excited of the bunch, for manipulating the coin. We decided to put our wager to the test. My girlfriend volunteered to have the only finger on the coin, while the rest of us just touched her elbow. We also asked her to close her eyes, look up away from the board, and asked a couple of questions. After receiving no response, we asked our final question. "Is anyone here?" My girlfriend screamed, and we jumped away. We saw her crying as the coin spelled, "Stop!" Her eyes were still closed, her face turned toward the ceiling, and tears were running down her cheeks. It continued for 30 seconds and finally let her go. We tore the piece of paper up, flushed it down the toilet, and sat stunned and speechless. My girlfriend said she had absolutely no control over her body and wanted to look down and jump away from the board, but she couldn't. I will never forget that night, and I've been convinced of the unknown ever since. Story 7. 2 years ago, my family moved into a very nice apartment complex in the Houston, Texas area. We were looking for a nice complex and went in, where we were told by the assistant manager that they had a model apartment used for viewings. She mentioned that it had not been occupied for a long time but was willing to give it to us. We moved in a month later without giving it much thought. The apartment had a studio attic that was connected to the stairway. The attic studio was open, and from the attic you could see the living room below. Every time the maintenance people had to do something, they were very quick to leave and not mingle around too much in the apartment. The maintenance manager once made a remark and said, "I never thought they were going to lease this apartment again." When asked why, he was very quick to change the subject and avoid answering. The graveyard shift nurse and my wife and kids stayed at home alone 4 times out of the week. During my days off, I would stay up at night watching TV. I noticed a heavy, cold presence in the living room close to the stairs, as if someone was looking at me. Between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m., I always felt a presence watching me to the point where I would oftentimes leave the living room. It felt like someone was at the stairwell looking down on me. A year later, we had moved out and into our first new home. I told my wife randomly that I felt comfortable in the new home and didn't feel any bad energy watching me. My wife turned pale as snow and asked if I had felt the same energy watching us from the stairway in the early morning hours. We both turned pale as we realized at that moment that we had lived in an apartment that housed a spirit. To this day, we don't know exactly what happened. Our assumption is that someone ended their own life by jumping from the studio attic into the living room. The management locked the unit for a long time and then decided to lease it again. No one in the complex will open up and talk about what happened in apartment 2811. Story 8. I scared a bunch of people on the night shift. I pre-recorded some murmuring and random words like hello and you've made a big mistake on my phone, then got a Bluetooth speaker and set it in a room. Why? Because we had planned to play the Ouija board. The place I used to work at was nice. The median age of employees was roughly 23, and there were about 30 of us all together. All of them were friends, but some of us were mischievous. Pranking each other was a daily routine, and often the CEO and co-workers were involved. They were always involved after the fact when everyone laughed at the poor soul who got pranked. One night, someone suggested we play the Ouija board, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity to mess with everyone. The Bluetooth speaker was a tiny one. The only problem was that it had a blue light, which would be visible in a dark room, so I put tape over it and placed it inside an open box with my cell phone connected. I was one of the biggest skeptics in the office, so if I could act scared, it would be very convincing. I used an office iPad to record the event, and everyone was aware of the recording. We sat down and started holding hands, so I couldn't just take out my phone to play the audio. This is where my genius became tangible. I had set it up with 5 minutes of silence before the audio started, and 5 minutes later the question on the table was, "Is someone here?" Amazingly, a voice came saying, "Hello." Everyone freaked out. It was perfect timing. Then the murmurs started, followed by a whispering voice saying, "Don't mess with us." And then, "Mark killed me. He killed me." I had to act freaked out. One slip, and I would give it all away. Then a coworker of mine let go of the hand and fell to the floor. He passed out. We turned on the lights, and a few seconds later, he came to. We gave him water and calmed him down. Seeing the collective scare on my coworkers' faces and the brilliant execution, I thought the best way to honor it would be not to tell them what I did. It's been a few years, and I'm sure there are 5 guys out there still telling people how they experienced a real ghost, killed by someone called Mark.